Okay, so I'm just going to give some very quick definitions or answers to these questions, just so it's a more condensed version. But the first question is, how would you define Chinese mothering, and what is your first impression of this approach? So, and as concise as I can say, Chinese mothering requires strict obedience and excellence, and it imposes the will of the mother onto the child. My first impression of this approach is that it's very tough on the child and on the mother-child relationship as well. The second question is discuss 3 differences between Chinese and Western mindsets. The first difference is parents' views of the child's self-esteem. So Chinese parenting is so that they view their child as like being able to withstand harsh criticism and not fragile, and a Western parent would see their child as fragile and not being able to withstand as tough criticism. A quote from the book says, "Western parents are concerned about their child's psyches, Chinese parents are not. They assume strength, not fragility, and as a result, they behave very differently." One example of that is just how Chinese and Western parents both approach academics. Like a Chinese parent would be very blunt with their child and saying like a B sucks, like you must be stupid. And a Western parent would be like, oh, you did great, B is so much better than C, good job, kid. And the third difference is that Chinese parents believe they know what is best for their children and therefore override all their children's own desires and performances. So an example of this is if a Chinese parent had a child who wanted to go out for theater, they would not allow that. They don't see involvement in theater as a hobby or a skill that will lead them to a successful career, so they don't really see any reason to engage in it. Or they also don't see it as any sort of prestigious activity to be involved in. However, if a Western parent had a child who wanted to engage in theater, they would probably have the mindset of like, if it makes you happy and if it fulfills you, then you should go for it, even if they didn't think that was for the best, in the best interest of their child's future. The last question is, did the author use psychological control with her daughters, and use examples from the book? So yes, she did use psychological control with her daughters in many ways. One example is when her oldest daughter Sophia was practicing piano, she told her that if she wouldn't perform perfectly, she was going to take all of her stuffed animals and burn them. So that was a fear tactic that she used to control her daughter's behavior, to elicit a behavior that she wanted to see, which was perfect performance on the piano. Another example of that is one of her daughters was performing in Hungary at a prestigious event, and the music teacher that was sent to coach her was being very, very harsh and unkind to her. So she left. Her daughter Lulu left the practice and refused to come back in. And Amy had to chase her out of the practice and guilted her to try and come back in by saying, like, you're letting us down, you're disgracing our family, you're disgracing the teacher. And those were all tactics that she used. The guilt tactic in that circumstance was not effective. Lulu did not go back into the practice. However, with Sophia, those tactics did work, and she became an incredible pianist. She performed at Carnegie Hall and was world-renowned for being a prodigy. So yes, she did use psychological control. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Mostly they worked for her oldest daughter and not as much for her youngest daughter.